Number 14 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. The committee is meeting today to continue its study on the inclusion of Indigenous languages on federal ballots for the first hour. The second hour, the committee will move in camera to continue its consideration of the draft report on the review of the conflict of interest and ethics code for members. The clerk has sent out a new version, too, of the draft report on Tuesday. So in order to suspend it in camera, I will briefly suspend the meeting. And I just am going to take a moment to acknowledge that we are in the Wellington building, and part of why we are in the Wellington building was to ensure that we had Indigenous language interpretation. And today we have been informed that we will not have Inuktitut language interpretation available in this building. And I do hope the interpreter is all right, and so I'm not sure of all the details, but I do know that I'm disappointed that the resources and access is not there. And I also do want to state on the record that one of our witnesses today had asked for interpretation, which is something that I know as members of Parliament we've been fighting hard for to ensure that it is available. So I do want to apologize to that witness that it's not available, and should the witness want to come back at a time that language interpretation is available, I am confident the committee would welcome the return of the witness at that time. So I just want to state that on the record, and anybody want to make any comments on that? But I can assure you that the clerk is working on working to make sure that we do have language interpretation available in the future, and it is something that we will address moving forward. Ms. Idlow.
I just want to acknowledge that effort that you've made to make sure that I could speak in my mother tongue. I really do appreciate it, and appreciate the challenges as well. And I just wanted to share that while it is disappointing that I'm willing to proceed in English, as I think the witnesses that we have today are very important to the information that this committee will gain in its work. So I'm willing to proceed in English.
I thank you for those comments. Today we have the following witnesses. It's a perfect segue to let everyone know that the Office of the Languages Commissioner of Nunavut is with us. Ms. Aryak is the commissioner. Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated is here. Luki Kutirik is the president. We have First Nations of Quebec and Labrador Youth Network, Mr. Cedric Gray-Lehoux, Monsieur Sekouan.
And Mr. Sekouan. So we'll take a minute, and just so people can share their comments.
About 5 minutes for opening comments. I will just let everyone know, because we have new and returning members, that we are continuing in the hybrid format. And if you have something of substance that the committee needs to share, I will be very flexible with time. So please do take this time for committee members to be able to gain from the expertise and knowledge that you are providing. With that, I will pass the screen over to Carleen Aryak, Commissioner.
Quyennamik, are you able to hear me, everyone?
Yes, clearly.
Okay. First off, I also am disappointed. I was hoping to speak in my mother tongue in Inuktitut today, but I also recognize the challenges and appreciate the challenges and the efforts that you guys have gone through to make sure that I was able to speak in Inuktitut. Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee, Quyennamik, for inviting me today. It's an honor for me to appear before you. Nunavut is a jurisdiction like no other. It has 3 official languages. That's Inuktitut, which includes Inuktitut and Inuinnaqtun, English and French. The majority of Nunavut residents speak Inuktitut as their mother tongue, and in fact, a majority of Nunavut Inuit speak primarily Inuktitut, despite significant declines in its use. Election ballots used in municipal and territorial elections across Nunavut include Inuktitut, and I think there is no reason for the Government of Canada to adhere to a lesser standard. At a minimum, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples requires Canada to ensure that interpretation is available to electors who prefer to use Inuktitut when casting their ballot. However, the secrecy of the vote will be compromised if we rely solely on interpretation services to facilitate an elector's participation in the democratic process. This is especially true of small fly-in communities where Inuit electors could have concerns about others knowing how they voted. This is why it is vital to use interpretation services only when strictly necessary and when there are no other options. In this case, there's a clearly viable option of using Inuktitut on ballots in federal elections, just as it is used in municipal and territorial elections across Nunavut. The Inuit Language Protection Act requires the use of Inuktitut in public signs, posters, reception, and client services. The ILPA applies to federal agencies, departments, and institutions. And despite this, Elections Canada has failed to implement its Inuit language obligations to comply with ILPA in Nunavut. My office advised Elections Canada of its ILPA obligations since Nunavummiut had filed concerns which attracted significant media attention. I'd like to give you 5 examples of admissible concerns that our office has received. Example 1, Inuktitut was missing on posters directing voters where to vote during advance polls. Example 2, the dates and hours of operation for advance polling were not available in Inuktitut. Example 3, information at the advanced polling stations and information regarding special ballot instructions were not available in Inuktitut. Example 4, the name of the organization, Elections Canada, was not provided in Inuktitut on the voter information card. And example 5, we are experiencing COVID. The mask required sign posted on a door during election day was only in English. My office has also received concerns that syllabics were not printed on the federal ballots, even though the current laws do not require this. I therefore recommend the following to encourage the inclusion of all Nunavummiut in the federal electoral process. Recommendation number 1, amend the Canada Elections Act to include both Roman orthography and Inuktitut syllabics on federal election ballots. Recommendation number 2, amend the Canada Elections Act to use Inuit language text in Elections Canada public signs and posters that is at least as prominent as English and French. Recommendation number 3, create and implement a policy and procedure specific to Nunavut to ensure that Elections Canada complies with its obligations as set out in the Inuit Language Protection Act. Elections Canada must take effective measures to remove all barriers to participation of Nunavut Inuit electors in the democratic process. UNESCO marked 2022 as the beginning of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages to ensure Indigenous peoples' rights to preserve, revitalize, and promote their languages. I also wanted to quote, and as stated in the preamble to Nunavut's Inuit Language Protection Act, quote, deploring the past government actions and policies of assimilation and the existence of government and societal attitudes that cast the Inuit language and culture as inferior and unequal, and acknowledging that these actions, policies, and attitudes have had a persistent negative and destructive impact on the Inuit language and on Inuit. It is imperative for federal agencies, departments, and institutions such as Elections Canada to commit to taking all necessary steps for the usage, preservation, revitalization, and promotion of the Inuit language in Nunavut. Koyanami, merci. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner, for those opening comments. It's great to have you here with us. I will now be turning the screen over to President Kotirik. If you are with us, I would ask witnesses, if suitable, if you would keep your cameras on, then we can see everyone for the whole time. And it's nice to have faces, even though virtual. And I've just received a nice note from Ms. Idlo to say today is also Indigenous Languages Day. So I think it's important that we acknowledge that. So thank you for that information. And it's interesting because I knew, and I heard it on the news this morning, and we should have, and all the more reason that, this conversation we're having is very timely, and it's really important that we acknowledge and recognize the resources and supports that need to go with any changes we make to make sure that it is successful. So I thank you for that, Ms. Idlot. And now to President Kotirik. Welcome.
Yan naming udlak ko pasi kovesik po nga ilaw kataw yun nakama inok titong na kaw yung agara kalunat titong nakama. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I thank you all for inviting me to present to you as you undertake a study on the inclusion of Indigenous languages on federal election ballots. The topic today is very important. It is especially important with the backdrop of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, 2022 to 2032. And I would point out, as was just pointed out, that today is Indigenous Languages Day. I am joining you virtually from Iqaluit, Nunavut. Nunavut is the only province or territory in Canada where the mother tongue of the majority of the population is homogeneously neither French or English. In fact, in 2016, the Canadian Census painted a very clear picture. For Nunavut, there is a heading that reads Official Languages, 11,020 English, 595 French, and a heading that reads Non-Official Languages, 22,600 Inuit languages. Both federally recognized official languages are minority languages in Nunavut. Nunavut Inuit expect to hear, see, read, and speak Inuktitut in all aspects of their daily lives in Nunavut. This expectation includes participation in democracy through the casting of our votes. Until being moved to communities between the 1940s and 1960s, Inuit continued to live nomadic lives and govern themselves with very limited government interactions. In 1950, Inuit were given the right to vote. However, according to Elections Canada, it wasn't until 1962 that all Inuit communities actually had access to voting services. As voting citizens, we elect our representatives. We choose a representative thinking that they have a good understanding of our lived experiences and will be in the best position to be able to promote our interests and our views. We expect elections to be fair so that all Inuit can freely participate in elections. During the most recent federal election in 2019, the voter turnout, according to Elections Canada, was 38% in Nunavut. This was the lowest compared to all other provinces and territories in Canada, where the average voter turnout was 67% of all eligible voters. In other words, the majority of those who are eligible to vote in Nunavut did not vote and did not elect their member of parliament. That is not good. It is not good for our democracy, and it is not good for our country. In a 2019 CBC News article, Iqaluit resident Elizabeth Annangmiuk shared how she was asked to translate a sign that stated mandatory mask when she told election staff at the Iqaluit polling station that the sign was not made available in Inuktitut. She translated one sign, but then declined when she was asked to translate more. Elizabeth commented that it was not her job to do Elections Canada a favor when they were not prepared, and that it was disheartening to see signs not made available in Inuktitut. Worrying about the impact that this may have on unilingual Inuktitut speakers, Annangmiuk said, "It's just not acceptable to see Inuktitut in the signs that are meant for our community. The reality is, it is quite common in our daily lives as bilingual Inuktitut-speaking and English-speaking Inuit to be expected to provide interpretation and translation services. One important way to encourage Inuit to participate in the democratic process is to reduce every possible barrier for them to vote. It is commendable that Elections Canada has taken some initiatives to address the issue. For example, in the 2019 election, Elections Canada translated the voting guide, voter information cards, and some other material into Inuktitut, and their information campaign included ads in Inuktitut, among other things. To date, however, Inuktitut is not on the ballot, and the efforts by Elections Canada are inconsistent and ad hoc, depending on the goodwill of the staff of the day. What we need is a consistent system that is legally required in order to provide these services in Inuktitut and other Indigenous languages. As I begin my conclusion, I want to point out how commendable it is that the current government has made reconciliation with Indigenous peoples an important priority. Supporting Indigenous peoples in Canada and the right to vote in their own language could be an important step towards the goal of reconciliation. It would help us feel as Indigenous people like we are an important part of the democratic system. It would demonstrate respect for our language, our culture, and our worldviews as a self-determining people. We would have a stronger sense of our ownership in the Canadian democratic institutions, which would provide a stronger foundation not only for Canada to move forward with Indigenous peoples and make Canada stronger. To recap, Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated supports putting Indigenous languages on ballots in ridings with substantial presence of Indigenous peoples, and supports giving voters the right to request special ballots in an Indigenous language of their choice, no matter where they may live. Such an initiative would make us stronger as a country and would contribute towards the goal of reconciliation. Poyan naming. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening comments. And Mitnova.
So now we have two persons here with the First Nations of Quebec and Labrador Youth Network. And I understand it's Mr. Greg Lepeu that will be intervening now. Welcome.
Everyone, Madam Chair, members of the committee. And today I am here as spokesperson for the First Nations of Quebec and Labrador Youth Network, as well as president of the same organization. And our reflections will be shared by one of my co-spokespersons, Siwan Vala, and it will be done in French. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, dear members of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, you have brought to our attention a request regarding the feasibility, challenges, and benefits of translating ballots into First Nations, Inuit, and Métis languages. First of all, we would like to stress that we support all initiatives that in any way enhance or revitalize our languages. However, we would like to take this opportunity to answer your question about the benefits of including these languages in ballots. First, we must say that ballot translation is not a priority when it comes to revitalizing our languages. On average, less than 1 in 2 Indigenous people, about 40%, vote in federal elections. There are many reasons for this, but no study has mentioned ballot translation as a solution to this abstention. Above all, we imagine that this measure would cost an enormous amount of money that, if the goal is to revitalize our languages, would be better spent elsewhere. For example, to recognize and financially compensate our elders, build spaces in which we could meet to learn our languages, and organize trips with our younger community members. Your committee is not mandated with making these decisions, but if the House is looking to support our nations, we have ideas. and would be happy to discuss them with you. Lastly, as spokespersons of the RGP and QL, we would also like to stress the importance of not taking any more measures that increase the environmental burden that we are all experiencing, and translating ballots into 60 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis languages would inevitably add to the waste generated by elections. In conclusion, while we would again like to emphasize the good intentions of this measure, we do not believe in it. It is a priority. The money that would be earmarked to implement it could be better invested in our communities, and we denounce its environmental impact. Thank you.
Beaucoup.
Thank you for your comments. To all the MPs here in our committee. So let's begin with.
I understand it's Mr. Viss, followed by Mr. Turnbull, puis Madame Gill, and Madame Idlout. So, Mr. Viss, to you, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for appearing today. My first question will go to the Language Commissioner from Nunavut, Ms. Ariak, and the first question I have for you is if, for example, residents of the territory were able to, say, write on a special ballot in Inuktitut, and sorry if I pronounced that wrong, do you think voter participation would increase?
Thank you for the question. And if I understand your question correctly, you're talking about special ballots? If they were able to write,
that's my
if
first
they were
question.
able.
Yeah, on special ballots, yes.
So in Nunavut, it's already expected, like I mentioned, in territorial and municipal elections. They're already all in syllabics. And the reason why our office, I believe, received concerns regarding federal elections, even though it's not federally, there's no obligation. Inuit are already expecting that. We're already practicing the fact that we have Inuktitut syllabics in our ballots in Nunavut. So, of course, I think in order to increase participation, and I recognize the fact that there is some information that Elections Canada has made available through the past federal elections, more available in the Inuit language. But this having the Inuit language in ballots would help in increasing the voter turnout. I also wanted to point out the fact that our orthography is using syllabics and Roman orthography. Roman orthography, which is basically in the English alphabet, and the syllabics that we do use. And so we use both those orthographies.
Thank you. And an additional question for you. The Commissioner of Elections Canada pointed to the fact that they had serious infrastructure issues with printing ballots, in that printing ballots in syllabics, for example, would be very, very hard for them to accomplish. In advance of an election. I'm assuming that you, as the Commissioner of Elections in Nunavut, already have that capacity. Do you think that that's a real barrier, the printing of ballots in 2 or 3 different languages, as a reason why we shouldn't include your Indigenous language on a federal ballot?
The issue that they're coming across with infrastructure is something they have to deal with. In my opinion, if we have our language on the ballots, it will definitely help Nunavummiut be a part of the democratic process, which I think is very important to include Inuit and Indigenous people in Canada, especially in Nunavut, since we already have these rights recognized in Nunavut.
So just to be clear, you as the the elections commissioner in the territory have never faced infrastructure challenges printing ballots in multiple languages?
Commissioner of Nunavut?
Yeah. Have you
They've never had
ever?
issues.
Okay, they've never had issues. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yes, if I can also add, and same thing with the municipal elections. So there are two, the territorial elections is one, and municipal elections are another, and there has been no issues with those that they have faced. Thank you.
Okay. I'm glad you pointed out some of the concerns about printing information in Nuktuk for voters, and Elections Canada did recognize that. But hearing it from you, I see that the problem might have been more acute than what we were led to believe at the last election. And if I take anything away from this meeting, is that there is a minimum standard there that has to be met, that has not been met to date, and that's very problematic for me to hear. And I want to thank you for sharing that information. Another question: the Elections Canada recommended that one way of moving forward would be to have the ballots printed, like a copy of the ballot, a facsimile of the, if I said that word correctly, of the ballot in Inuktitut, beside the English version. What would you think of a compromise along those lines, where the ballot necessarily wouldn't be in the Indigenous language, but it would be a copy of the ballot in the Indigenous language would be available in each voting booth?
If I understand you correctly, so when people go out to vote, they would be a copy like on inside the booth for.
Yeah.
That would be a help, but it's not on the ballot. And what we're talking about is how including Inuit language in the ballots.
Yeah.
Skip that. Let's get the Inuit language in the ballots.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions. That was very helpful.
That was very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Viss. Mr. Turnbull, 6 minutes to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of an echo. Can you hear me okay?
We can. We don't have an echo. Okay,
great. Thanks. Thank you for being here. I really appreciated your testimony. We did hear from the CEO of Elections Canada earlier this week, and Mr. Perreault made some remarks, and I think he highlighted different options, 4 different options, and also talked a little bit about the pilot that was done in Nunavut in the last election. And so there was some attempt, I think, to translate and provide some of the election materials in Inuktitut. And I think some of you have acknowledged that there's some effort there. But I also think that you've also pointed out that there were that was insufficient. And when I asked the CEO of Elections Canada whether he had received any feedback from the people in Nunavut, he didn't seem to have much to say in terms of direct feedback. So I wanted to give you the opportunity. I think you've given some feedback here, but in general, you also, I think, Ms. Kotirik, I hope I pronounced that correctly. You had said that there was a low turnout in the last election. Do you think that was a result of the pilot not being successful?
Thank you for the question. I think as Mr. Volant indicated, I think there are many factors to why there is low voter turnout. Part of it is that, and I indicated in my remarks, it's still fairly new since the 1960s, something that we've been exercising, the ability to vote. But as Commissioner Ariak has indicated, Inuit expects to see to be able to participate in the democratic process in Inuktitut. So I think any efforts to ensure that Inuktitut is available on the ballots will help to make it less intimidating, less make it something that we feel like we're a part of. Sometimes I've heard, there's been instances where I've heard candidates say on the community radio, for instance, when you go vote, my name will be in the middle if there are 3 candidates. Or if you go vote, my name will be the last one, just because it's not in Inuktitut. And so to give people the confidence that they're going to vote for the person that they want to vote for. And to me, that's adapting to a system that is not serving our needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your remarks. I appreciate that response. I know Mr. Viss also mentioned what the CEO had said was sort of his preference, which seemed to be the ballot facsimile, which is a copy of the ballot that could be translated into Inuktitut and put in the voter booth so that electors could reference that when they're filling out the ballot. And I think the reason that the CEO was saying that that would work, and I think it goes beyond just Nunavut, because I think you acknowledged in some of your opening remarks that perhaps Nunavut was unique in jurisdiction because the majority of electors are speaking one Indigenous language, whereas in other parts of the country, there is many Indigenous languages that are present in different jurisdictions. So I think the CEO was trying to find a solution that might work for all Indigenous languages and many jurisdictions across the country. And so I think there's consideration there, and I know that this is a challenging issue because, of course, we're all committed to doing what's best here, which I think is moving along the path to ensuring that all Indigenous languages are included to the greatest degree possible. I just wonder, whether under that circumstance, considering all of the other jurisdictions, whether you think the ballot facsimile would be a good approach to take, because I recognize that Nunavut might be somewhat unique. Ms. Ariak, maybe I could go to you if that's okay.
And Koyanamik, Mr. Turnbull, for the question. My jurisdiction is in Nunavut, and I would like to acknowledge that. These language rights are in Nunavut. The federal department, government agencies have to abide by these language legislations in Nunavut already. And this is why my recommendation was for Elections Canada to have a specific policy and procedure for Nunavut electors, because this is a jurisdiction that recognizes not only the official languages of Canada, English and French, but it also recognizes the Inuit language. And because of the uniqueness of our jurisdiction, we expect our language rights to be respected. Mm-hmm. We expect to be able to be involved in the electoral process, to have our language visible and be used, if that answers your question.
It does, yeah, and thank you very much for that. I guess what I'm wondering then is, would Nunavut have a different approach than other jurisdictions around the country from your point of view? I recognize that you're advocating for your jurisdiction, and I think that makes perfect sense. And would never fault you for doing so, that's for sure. I'm just thinking more broadly, as Elections Canada has a mandate to serve the entire country from an election standpoint. I'm just wondering whether you think that the approach in Nunavut should be unique to Nunavut, and that maybe there's a different approach needed for other jurisdictions. What would you say to that, Ms. Ariak?
That would support the recommendation that I had mentioned regarding the fact that I would like Elections Canada to have a specific policy and procedure for Nunavut because of our jurisdiction and the legislation that we have. I think it would be a great opportunity to start off with working better with within the jurisdiction of Nunavut. And again, I also recognize the fact that there were some efforts that were being done by Elections Canada in the last federal election to expose and have more communications and material in the Inuit language. But again, there were some shortfalls. And I think because in Nunavut, we're in a jurisdiction where language rights are strong, I think it would be a great start. And for the other jurisdictions, that facsimile, how did you say? Sorry, English is my second language.
No problem. That ballot facsimile.
Yeah, the ballot facsimile in other jurisdictions, I could see that working. But in Nunavut, we're advanced in recognizing our language rights, our Inuit language rights. And my recommendation, as mentioned, is to have the Inuit language in Roman orthography and in syllabics in the ballot.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I note that Mr. Volant also raised his hand, so maybe he could respond quickly if you were okay with that, just because I don't want him to feel excluded, and thank you.
We would not want that. Mr. Volant?
Mr. Volant. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to make a little comment. You would notice that our comments from our Inuit sisters seem somewhat contradictory to what we said, but it's not really the case. Maybe it's more an opportunity for you members of this committee to finally see the difference. Well, not so much differences, just recognizing that each nation is unique. I'm 30 years old. I'm part of the latest generation that speaks the language perfectly. So what matters is revitalizing the language so our youth can learn. I have a lot of nephews and nieces that no longer speak the language. They speak more English on YouTube rather than, that's my language. So I'm not sure if it would help. I can take my mother as an example, who is 69 years old. She doesn't really speak French. She has a hard time with French. She goes to vote, and I don't think that it's really such an issue for us in the South having voting ballots in Innu. What really matters is earmarking funds towards learning, revitalizing our language. That's what matters. Well, whether you're Francophone, Anglophone, it doesn't matter. You learn to speak before you read and write. So for us, it doesn't really matter when we have things in our language to facilitate our voting. If it's better to give them a reason to vote, not just facilitating their voting, providing them a genuine reason to vote. Thank you for these comments. And now, Madam Gill, 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, greetings to Greg LaHoo and all the witnesses here today. I have to say that as an MP from the North Shore, I'm pleased to see young people here, not just for the North Shore, but youth in our committee. That's rare. And I'm also on the Indigenous Peoples Affairs Committee. It would be nice to hear them more often. Mr. Volant said, yes, 30 years, indigenous populations are very young in several communities. I'm thinking of Atikamekw. We have 65% of youth under 35 years old, so I'm relatively old compared to them. And you said, yes, we all have goodwill. We see differences between what's happening in Nunavut and what's happening in the North Shore. The Mastayash is right next door, and the Saguenay Lac Saint Jean is the same thing. This would make people vote more. It would strengthen indigenous languages, and I'm wishing you a happy Indigenous Languages Day today. So I'm saying, let's say we have that. We say it will be on the ballot. We can promote languages in Noemon, for example. In my office, indigenous people will see their languages more visible. Is there something that we could do electronically as we discuss the voting? Would it be easier? Maybe the ecological footprint, the environmental footprint would not be the same, even if it doesn't really strengthen indigenous languages. But could that be interesting for some people? I'm thinking about senior citizens, maybe just seeing their language being a living language. Thank you.
Bonjour Marlène, fait longtemps.
Thank you, Marlene. We haven't seen each other for quite a while. Marlene is our MP in our riding. That's a hard question to answer. When a different entity takes over the language, yeah, I think you see where I'm going. Yes, it's great. When you go to the hospital, you can say welcome, bonjour, welcome in several languages, but I don't think I feel more welcome or really feel at home. Yourself, as a Quebecer, you would say, yes, bonjour, that expression belongs to your language and culture. And the Canadian construct doesn't really belong to me. My traditions are based on ancestral spirituality. That's what governs my daily life. So maybe it could help, but as I said, my mother, who doesn't really speak French, I think you met her September 30th. I would thank you for being there. She has a choice to vote one way or the other, but the word vote doesn't even exist in the Innu language. The very concept, it doesn't really work. We will not reinvent the wheel as such. But she's not really going to feel at home. Well, that's interesting. I think we're talking about in-depth cultural issues here. When you say the word doesn't even exist, today talking about identity, that identity doesn't exist. The issues of identity, voting, even culturally, if you want to do translations or interpretation, it's all literal, so it doesn't really convey what you want to express as First Nations. That's what you're saying. Yes, there is a language, we can see it, it's written, but it doesn't really correspond to your values. Do you want to relativize? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're talking about appropriation or some sort of misunderstanding of what you would like to see. You think it's better to fund the language so it can be taught, so that it can be spoken at home, at work? It's more important than just ballots. Yes, that's what really matters, because Cedric earlier was saying we learn to speak before we write, and quite frankly, 75% of my Innu language, I still have problems reading it and speaking it. It's a different matter. It requires experts to write. For a young person, I think it would be much easier to go vote for Marlene Gill rather than trying to come up with a word she's never heard that would be this long. It would be much easier for us, the youth, as I said earlier, trying to come up with a way to allow First Nations people to feel at home so they can go vote. So long as you have the Indian Act in force, indigenous people can never really feel quite at home in the House of Commons. Thank you, Mr. Barra. Another question, maybe it's going to go over, maybe I can do it later. As far as 1% ceiling, we're quite technical in the last meeting. Madam Chair, would you allow me, maybe I can wait till later? The 1% issue, it's very technical. It's still voting rights. Not really the voting rights, the ballots. Sorry. So, yeah. So I spoke to the CEO, and it's a proposal right now. The proposal could have significant impacts on other indigenous languages, other subjects, not just ballots. So we could have in a writing, we have 1% of the people speaking the language. I had a lot of difficulty with that. For you, Quebec territory will be some sort of we're not talking about Metasinan, it's a whole different matter. And the issue of electoral boundaries, do you think these platforms, this quantitative thresholds, be it for ballots or for other decisions that the government will take, you think this can hold? I would add, I know people such as Natasha, even Michel Odette. I was talking to Michel Odette yesterday, and he said, yes, I will learn Inuiman. So that's what I felt, that we should not really depend on this criteria to find a place for indigenous languages. I would like to hear you on that. Thank you. I will answer that question. It's this is what drove our thoughts. I recognize that my northern sisters have a different reality. Their languages is quite regional. In Quebec, Labrador, there are 11 nations with 11 distinct languages. So we see it would add a certain level of complexity and a financial burden that could be better used in establishing connections with the territory, with our elders, to maintain the cultural links that for hundreds of years were systematically destroyed by the institutions that were put in place. I don't really want to get too much into detail, but I think we all know what we're talking about. We thought it would be more important for the youth to learn their languages before investing in a system that doesn't really represent them. We should prioritize the implementation of systems to foster language learning and also moving towards recognizing the Canadian Quebec election system, that it should really be focused on our youth and the need to reconnect with their languages and cultures. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Hidlo.
Several met Axuaro Koyari Mabasi Unikaka to Gasset Tamasit to Sang Nocturne Nodlusi, Adjiging it to Neokasakaktin Nagaraktilusi. I just wanted to first thank you so much to all the witnesses for coming here on Indigenous Languages Day to speak about Indigenous languages. I think it's such an important topic, and to hear the varying opinions about our language and the investments that we need to focus on, just to me is such a huge indication of how deep the impacts of colonialism is. So I do appreciate all the different views. My first question will be to Languages Commissioner Carleen Arek. I would like to ask you, knowing that Canada had adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples a few years ago, Canada has international obligations. And in Section 13 of the United Nations on the UNDRIP, it says that countries need to make sure Indigenous peoples understand colonial political processes. Do you feel that UNDRIP has been respectfully enforced by the federal government in regards to Indigenous voting?
Apirigavit Amaru. Thank you for the question, Lori, and thanks for the opportunity to answer your question. I'd like to get to actually another article in UNDRIP, which is Article 5, which provides that Indigenous peoples have the right to, quote, to participate fully if they so choose in the political, economic, social, and cultural life of the state, unquote. While Canada is making plans to implement UNDRIP, Article 5 and Article 13 should be focused on. And as you mentioned, Article 13 requires subscribing states to take effective measures to ensure language rights are protected, and also to ensure that Indigenous peoples can understand and be understood in political, legal, and administrative proceedings. So while the government and while Canada is committed to UNDRIP's implementation, going through this of making sure that the Inuit language are on the ballots would definitely help in that in the right direction. More needs to be done. I think we should especially take Nunavut as a priority. Why? Because we already have language rights in Nunavut. It's a unique jurisdiction. Why? Because Nunavummiut are expecting ballots in the Inuit language and getting information and being involved in this political process inclusively in our language. Why? Because my office is still receiving concerns regarding the electoral process, the fact that there is not Inuit language material or the ballots are not in Inuktitut. So there needs to be more done, but I think focusing on Nunavut because of its unique legal rights, language rights jurisdiction would be definitely on the positive right move.
My next question will be to President Kutuk. Could you share your experience because you've been elected as the president of Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, and NTI has been holding elections with Inuktitut on your ballot for many years now. I wonder if you could share your experience in ensuring that Inuit have Inuktitut on the ballots.
I was actually going to say and re-echo Commissioner Arek's comments about Inuit expecting it to be on ballots. It's always been a given, particularly for Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated and the regional Inuit associations as organizations representing Inuit. It's always been a given that the information would be available in Inuit languages and that the ballot would incorporate Inuit languages. And to do otherwise would be quite, it would be quite shocking, I think, for many Inuit. And I know that there had been a comment made earlier in terms of Elections Canada and their mandate to serve the whole country of Canada. But I think with public institutions, the mandate is to serve the public majority. And I think one of the things that I've continued to convey, and it's obvious to me often that I'm not articulate enough, is that, for instance, Canada recognizes officially 2 languages through the Official Languages Act of Canada that was enacted in 1969. And when they were working on modernizing it, I was trying to convey that the political landscape of Canada has changed. There is now a jurisdiction where the official languages of Canada are not a majority public language. And so public institutions trying to serve the public need to keep that in mind and make sure that they are meeting the needs of the public majority of the jurisdiction of Nunavut. So I think it's crucially important that all public institutions keep that in mind. And I also think that it is not helpful for us to have a discussion about whether resources should be allocated to something else other than ballots. In my view, and I think in the view of many Nunavut Inuit, the expectation is that Inuktitut is available in all aspects of our lives, in all public essential services, and that includes being able to vote. Hoyen naming.
Could you share your experience with NTI's electoral process and ensuring Inuktitut on your ballots?
So each time there's an election, we contract people to provide the services to support our elections and to ensure that there are individuals in each community who are able to conduct the election and ensure that the materials for candidates about the nomination process, about I was going to say the nomination process and all the information required to become a candidate is available in Inuktitut. In addition, for candidates, we provide the example of what the name would look like in Inuktitut and ensure that the candidate approves that the syllabics are the way they want it to be written, so that that appears on the ballot. But I think following this meeting, if you're okay with it, I think there's an opportunity to provide written submissions. So I'll make sure to submit information about how our electoral process works for Inuit organizations to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That would be very appreciated. And to Commissioner Ariak, even just the comments you're sharing in regards to what you're hearing, and I think that's what shows the importance of language and who can communicate with who. Would love to hear some of that as well in writing, if you don't mind sharing that with our committee. I think that would inform the work that we're doing very well. I know we were going to go into other business today, but I do think it's been a very fruitful conversation, and the insights that you're all sharing, I think, are appreciated by all. And if it's okay with our guests and you're able to stay, we would like to do a second round of questions. I'll try to keep better at keeping time so that we stay a little bit more on time, but the substance is so important that I do think it's important that we be able to complete thoughts and get to where we're going. So we'll do, is it okay with our guests to stay? Are you okay to stay with us for another half hour or so? Perfect, thank you. We will start with Mrs. Block, followed by Mrs. Sahota for 5 minutes each, et puis Madame Gill, and Ms. Idlout for 2.5 minutes, and then Mr. Scheer and Mrs. Romanato for 5 minutes. Mrs. Block.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And through you, I would like to thank all of our witnesses for joining us today. It has been awesome to hear the testimony that you're bringing forward on this very important issue. I do want to follow up on Mr. Turnbull, my colleague Mr. Turnbull's line of questioning. And I think what he was doing was highlighting that the CEO of Elections Canada has a mandate to address these kinds of barriers across the entire country. And so that perhaps when we look at addressing the barriers that have been brought forward by those individuals from Nunavut, it opens the door to all kinds of other conversations needing to take place. I do have a question for the commissioner, the Languages Commissioner of Nunavut. I believe it's Ms. Ariak. I believe that you suggested that there could be a specific policy for Nunavut based on the demographics and the official languages that exist in Nunavut. And it might tie in with a question to Ms. Koterik. When it comes to, I think, something that you said in your opening remarks around the need for a substantial presence or a significant number of individuals in order to provide this kind of service. We have heard various numbers suggested, and I'm wondering if Ms. Ariak, you would speak to the specific policy, and then Ms. Koterik, if you would, I guess, speak to what you believe would qualify as a riding having a significant Indigenous population.
Koyanami, thanks for your question. I think I'll start off with answering the first question you had directed to me. The recommendation I had mentioned earlier in my opening statements is the fact that our office has had correspondence with the elections commissioner. We've had correspondence indicating where there are shortcomings. We've had correspondence on sharing the concerns that our office is receiving. We've had correspondence regarding the fact that because in the Elections Act, it's not necessary to have the Inuit language in the ballots, but recognizing that there are language rights in Nunavut. So I come to this recommendation to you because this recommendation has been given to Elections Canada. Create and implement a policy and procedure specific to Nunavut to ensure that Elections Canada complies with its obligations. Elections Canada has obligations, and so do federal departments and agencies that are set out in the Language Protection Act in Nunavut. So ILPA requires Elections Canada to communicate with and provide certain services to the public in the Inuit language. And I'd like to get to a special section in Section 3 of the ILPA, obligates Elections Canada to use the Inuit language to display public signs, display and issue posters, and provide reception services and client or customer services that are available to the public. So there are obligations already for Elections Canada set out in the Inuit Language Protection Act. And this policy and procedure that I have recommended not only to the committee, but also to Elections Canada is to ensure that they will make sure they are doing their due diligence to ensure that they are following what they're obligated to do under the Inuit Language Protection Act. Does that answer your question, Mrs. Blah?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciated that clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes.
Ms. Koterik, do you want to speak as well? No. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So we'll go on. Is that okay? Mrs. Zahoda, 5 minutes to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the witnesses, to the Commissioner first. I'd like to ask, you had mentioned that the voter turnout in the 2019 election was 38%, and that is quite low. And of course, we want to make sure that we increase that voter turnout. And I see, and let me preface this by saying, I don't think this is the only reason to include Indigenous languages on the ballot, and especially in Nunavut. Nuktatuk, I think, is, like you mentioned, respect for language, or the other witness had mentioned, and having ownership over the political process. And of course, the right to self-determination. All of those things are very important and are obligations under UNDRIP. But I would like to know what the turnout is for municipal and territorial elections currently, and if you could give me a comparable for a similar election around that time, or at least the last couple of elections.
Commissioner Ariak, are you frozen? Are you there? Yes. The question was for yourself, for Mrs. Zahoda.
Oh, sorry. I believe the number that was mentioned was from President Kutik on the voter turnout, if I'm correct, Aluki?
Yes, it was. The number was from there, but I mean, either of you can answer. I'm sure you may have material as to what the voter turnout is for territorial and municipal elections as well. I could hear from both of you.
Yeah, well, both of us can provide written information to you in our submission on that if you'd like.
Is it because you don't have an exact number with you today?
Yeah.
That's quite all right. Is there a ballpark figure that you would know? Just, is it more than 38% or is it less than 38%, do you think?
Aluki, with your experience, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say I would prefer that we provide the information. We'll find out what the voter turnout was for the territorial election and municipal elections. I don't have that on hand. Thank you.
Okay. I guess I'll move on to a different type of question. In your experience, and this goes to all of the witnesses, how often have there been some types of consultations that have already taken place regarding this issue in Nunavut, and what have been the outcomes of that consultation process? Like, what do you hear from the residents of Nunavut in terms of seeing their language being used on the ballot? A little bit was referred in some opening statements. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more.
If I may, our political advisor, Simon Dabin, did a research project for his doctoral thesis on exactly this question of Indigenous voting within the federal system. So we will be sharing this with you after. As we mentioned some of our findings in our opening statements, there hasn't really been any research that shows that including Indigenous languages would increase the vote. Again, knowing that it is quite a complex reason behind Indigenous peoples not voting, and again, those numbers being about 40% of participation. We will be sending, however, just to make sure that you have that information in that research project so that you can have the most up-to-date information.
Okay, I'll move on to my next question unless there was a comment from somebody else. My next question is, we were talking to the CEO the other day about or some of the questions posed to him were about creating an advisory council on how to go about incorporating Indigenous languages onto the ballot. Do you have any suggestions as to how the Chief Electoral Officer, Elections Canada, could go about doing that? Or in terms of contacting the right assistants? Should they have somebody in-house to be able to provide all of the materials, or should they be contracting the services that that you contract out for the municipal and territorial elections right now? That the territory of Nunavut contracts out, and that also we just heard that Nunavut Tungavik Inc. also has contractors that they use for their ballots too?
I think the first step would be, in terms of Nunavut, would be to contact Nunavut Elections, who conduct the elections for the territorial government and the municipalities, to their process works. And I already indicated that I'd send information about how our elections work in Inuit organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, does anybody else want to comment on that? Perfect. Thank you so much for that exchange. Madame Gill, 2 minutes et demi pour vous.
Madame Gill, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I took a lot of time earlier. I have a last question. Maybe we can discuss this more in depth with Mr. Grilou and Mr. Boland. Earlier, you said that translation doesn't really promote participation in elections for Indigenous people, and it doesn't really revitalize Indigenous languages. Well, I understand. You discussed our sisters in Nunavut, where things are different, but for the Quebec Labrador Youth Network, if it doesn't promote participation and revitalization, what use would this be of then? Thank you. It's one of the points in our comments. We started by saying we recognize all efforts that could be meant to reinvigorate and promote indigenous languages, First Nations languages. The issue is that 11 different languages in Quebec. We're talking about a 1% threshold earlier. Our people are quite nomadic. We have to move often to different climes or studies or work. So we think that it would be a very big burden trying to carry out this activity, not only for the directors but for the workers in the polling stations. So we do believe that the money could be used better in strengthening our languages and implementing systems to support our youth, even if we do recognize the importance in some writings, in some specific situations, that there could be a significance in going ahead with this, and we do support our sisters in the arguments they present. Thank you. Mr. Volant, sorry. I'd just like to add something. Yes, my colleague. There are 43 First Nations communities, and it could be a logistic and language nightmare to make sure that the right pronunciation, the right writing is used in every community. I don't write. I don't speak the same Innu as in Tashkwan, Akwapashibi. We all have our differences, and I think that's the beauty of our languages. Thank you for those comments. Madam Itloud, 2.5 minutes, please.
I think my question will be to Aluki, because I'm appreciating the difficult dichotomy that we are faced with in terms of language and culture, and how the electoral process is very colonial for First Nations, Métis, Inuit communities. And at the same time, we're sitting here trying to understand what the barriers are to increasing voter turnout. And I think what we need to understand maybe from the Inuit perspective, and I'm asking you specifically, Aluki, because I know that you had to be elected as the president of NTI, and how within the Inuit culture, there may have been different ways of selecting elders and or leaders, selecting leaders for our communities. And could you maybe try to describe what the barriers might be that Indigenous people experience in trying to reach such activities like voting? Koyaname.
I think you raised a really interesting point in terms of culture. And I think that was one of the reasons I wanted to share when Inuit were able to vote starting in 1962, because Inuit were moved from the land to communities. So part of being moved from the land to communities, not only was it a drastic cultural change, lifestyle change in terms of even the economy, wage economy, going to school, participating in a community in the way we do now, but voting for a person, an individual, is something that also had to be learned, because in our nomadic family camp systems, leaders would become leaders based on their knowledge and their skills, and family members going to individuals based on their expertise on specific issues. And so the idea of leadership is in terms of an election is a different concept and is raised on occasion in our communities when there are discussions about isumatak or someone who's able to make decisions about things. And the irony of now having individuals who speak both English and Inuktitut being in positions even when they're fairly young to be leaders. And I think that's in contradiction to the way our culture would often function very recently in living history. And so that adds an additional barrier to how things are done. And I think it's quite uncomfortable for Inuit candidates in the way in which candidates go around saying, vote for me, I have the best skill set. Vote for me, I will be capable of doing this. Vote for me, this is what I will do for you. Because culturally, that the idea of self-promotion is quite frowned upon because we're all part of our communities. We're all, each of us, regardless of who we are and what we do, have an important role in our community. So no one is to be held at a higher pedestal than that of someone else. So it becomes quite uncomfortable, even for candidates, to be asking for people's votes. So that adds to how there may be a low. I mean, we talked a little bit about the different factors to why there might be lower voter turnouts, but I think that might be one. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. Kiuvagi, Lori. Thank you.
Thank you for those words and that information. Mr. Scheer, 5 minutes to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I really do appreciate the testimony that we've heard today. It's been a great discussion, and I think we can all agree on the goal of facilitating participation in elections. And but I think some of the discussion has touched upon some of the challenges that many speakers of Inuit and Indigenous languages face on a more general basis. And I was wondering if Monsieur Vallon can speak to a little bit about, expand a little bit on the comment that you had made, that the directing of resources towards ensuring that the ballots themselves are printed in more languages than just English and French. You said that members in your community have other areas where they believe that the investment of those resources could have a bigger impact, perhaps. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's the impression I got. So I was wondering if you could maybe just speak to that a little bit, about some of the areas that you might consider resources like this being directed, instead of focusing solely on the ballots themselves, but into other types of programming or services that may help the people you represent have more ability to use their Indigenous languages.
Merci pour cette question, Monsieur.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Scheer. The language is mostly used at home. When I was young, my mother spoke to me always in Innu. So I think it's more an issue of investing in cultural language matters. It can go towards the well-being and the holistic healing of a person. If someday I have children, how do I teach them the language if I don't feel well at home? I think it's more towards social services, psychological services. We have to go far with this. I think we are only looking at the tip of the iceberg and everything that's underneath. It's so broad-based. Our entire culture, if we wish to learn our languages, our cultures, we have to have that well-being. First of all, it's an issue of identity. We must like that identity, and amongst First Nations people, it's not always the case. There are still these situations like systemic racism that we face. I want to be Innu when I go to hospital. Should I be bothered or embarrassed if I have to speak my language, even if there is an Innu interpreter? Should I fear speaking my language, using my language? Do I have to always suffer from racism and hatred? It goes a lot further, Mr. Shea. A perfect world would be where at home we as a nation, we can encourage the parents at home to speak to the children. It's very difficult that in school, in the primary and even kindergarten, what do we learn? A, B, C, D, E in English, French, and not in our languages. So what's easier for me as a child going back home? I spend days and days at home speaking French. So does that facilitate my discussing with my parents? And no, it's difficult, Mr. Shah. So I think we have to go much further. We have to dig deeper. If you need studies, we have the Tegabesh Institute in Innu that can tell you what's good in terms of the language area. We shouldn't just focus on the tip of the iceberg. We must go much beyond that. It's very important. It's not just being able to write in Innu on a ballot. I don't recognize the Canadian Constitution. If I don't recognize that Constitution as mine, I wouldn't bother to go vote. Earlier, I think it was the Malenghi, our MP, who was asking what should we do to urge First Nations to go vote. Well, give us the desire to do so, to recognize ourselves in that institution. Thank you.
Really appreciate that. I don't have any other questions on this file, so I'll hand my time over to either one of my colleagues or to one of the other committee members.
Mr. Volant helped you spend all your time, so I think that was a really good open-ended question, and I think the perspectives that he was able to provide are actually quite informing and even relatable a little bit for myself. I'm the child of immigrants from India, and we spoke Punjabi at home, and then all of a sudden I went to school, and it was like English, and I was just like, what's going on here? And then it was challenging because I lived in Canada outside of my house, and I felt like I lived in India in the house. So language is very important, and I really appreciated that exchange. Mrs. Romanado, over to you, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being with us today. This has been excellent testimony for us, and in fact will help feed a subsequent study that we will eventually be doing in terms of the 44th election. I think this is very beneficial for us to understand not just the question of Indigenous languages on ballots, but also the barriers for Indigenous peoples to participate in the democratic process. I want to follow up with respect to one of my colleagues. When the Chief Electoral Officer was here, she inquired about what the Chief Electoral Officer was doing in between elections to prepare. And based on the testimony from Ms. Ariak, it is clear that documentation for municipal and territorial elections, for instance, a vote here sign giving directions, already exists. So it's not a question of reinventing the wheel. The information is already available. And Ms. Ariak, you mentioned that the Chief Electoral Officer, you've been in correspondence with the Chief Electoral Officer, but I'm curious, and perhaps it would be more for a question for the Nunavut Chief Electoral Officer for Nunavut elections, but has there been any proactive approach to reach out to your organization to perhaps get assistance in making sure that documentation that is needing to be translated for federal elections is also in line with what you're doing? Because it strikes me that a poster, and you mentioned in example one, directing voters where to vote in advance polls that the chief electoral officer did not have that for a federal election when it exists at both municipal and provincial. And even more disturbing for me is the example 5 where it said mask required sign posted on a door during election was only in English, where I quickly went on the Public Health Agency of Canada website to look up information regarding coronavirus, and there was a drop-down menu where I could select the Inuktitut language and proceed to print myself a poster in the official languages of Nunavut about mask requirements and so on. So if this information already exists, how is it that the chief electoral officer cannot proactively make sure that this information is provided to you? So I have quite concerns that for some reason this is not happening. And I would hope, as my colleague said in the last meeting with the chief electoral officer, that in between elections, this outreach and pretty basic Googling is happening so that this is not an issue at the next federal election. If you'd like to comment, and or if any other witnesses would like to comment on that, thank you.
I believe that was directed to me, if I'm correct.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, so the process within our office in receiving concerns, we have to go through an investigative process, contact the obligated body, and when it is with Elections Canada, we have done so. So before the federal elections in 2021, I did correspond in the beginning of my tenure as the Languages Commissioner ahead of the elections of the previous concerns that our office had received. The response that I did receive was the efforts and the list of what Elections Canada was doing to ensure that there was more information available. That was promising. But why did my office continue to receive concerns during 2021? There's still issues that need to be addressed. And thank you for pointing out the mask, because that is something. It was already over a year that we were experiencing COVID.
Absolutely.
I would also like to mention.
Oh, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add a few things. There's many resources that are available in the Inuit language. There's also in Nunavut an Inuit Language Authority. What their objective is to standardize Inuit terminology. Is that something Elections Canada can go to? That's an Inuit Language Authority, which's sole purpose is to standardize Inuit English and Inuktitut terminology. There's also many other resources. Microsoft Bing Translator just came out with an instant translation. And even so, in the correspondence that I received from Elections Canada, they also have contracted out to ensure instant translation was available. If that was the case, then why was that not used for displaying the mask mandatory poster? That would be for Elections Canada to answer, but there are resources, there should be better efforts, and it is recognized by law in the jurisdiction of Nunavut.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to just reiterate, thank you for reaching out. But at the end of the day, I think it's up to the Chief Electoral Officer to also be proactive to do these kind of outreach efforts and to make sure that the information that you need and the people of Nunavut need is provided to them in real time and in their language. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I can speak for all committee members, definitely, and anybody watching at home, to say that this was a very informative panel, and you've all brought a lot of knowledge, experience with yourselves, and I really do want to thank you for providing us the extra time as well. So please do not hesitate to write to us or submit any documents or anything that you think is important for the committee. We would like to, we look forward to receiving it. So with that, I hope everyone keeps well and safe, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. I will suspend for about 2 minutes, and then we'll switch over to in-camera so we can continue with our work. Keep well and safe, everyone. Thank you.
Naliog, thank you.
Yeah, mais...